My name is Loueva Hatfield. You can see me on the program that you have. I'm just going to start off by telling you I'm a teacher. That's what I am. I'm a teacher. Started my teaching career with Sister Evelyn at Nazareth Academy and have been pretty well all over the place since then. Been in the field for about 33 years, and this is my last stop. I started a company named Hatch back in 2009. I have a real passion for rural education, and I just felt like I saw a lot of situations, especially in our Catholic schools, where children with learning differences were just not getting the services that they needed because our Catholic schools just didn't have the resources. And I felt like I needed to try to do something to change that. In the meantime, so I had this vision and I opened this company, again, called Hatch. We are a learning center, meaning we're like a rural Sylvan on steroids. We don't do anything computer-based, we do everything direct instruction. We also are a consulting firm, educational consulting firm. I've got lots of great teachers that come and work for me, and we provide all kinds of services, including this speaking engagement that I'm going to try to do. You guys are my biggest audience ever, so bear with me. I think it'll be okay. Since I am a teacher, I think we'll all just be fine. One of the things that we do in the Catholic schools in the diocese is we go in and we have these mobile teaching units. Okay? So I take a team of teachers into Catholic schools and we set up a learning lab. We call them Power Hour Learning Labs. And kids that are identified based on different kind of criteria in the different schools get to rotate in and out of our learning lab. We help them with what they're working on, but we also work on skill gap instruction. My teachers that I hire are very versed in being diagnostic and making sure that we find out exactly where the gaps are so that we're not only keeping them up, we are actually filling in gaps. And so that's what we do. Majority of my, after I was at Nazareth, the majority of my time has been in special education and then in administration. Okay? So today our topic this morning is curriculum. When Ashley called me, and we've been doing some professional development in St. Rose. St. Rose has done a great job. We've been doing professional development with them for about 6 or 7 years now. And we go in and we support the teachers on things that they would like to work on locally to help them complete their mission and steer all their instruction in the way that they desire. So what we've done this last year is we did curriculum alignment. We looked a lot at the curriculum there at that school, and so some other schools have gotten interested in it, and again, Ashley called me and she said, hey, curriculum is an animal. Every school I go into asks me about curriculum. Do you mind coming and speaking a little bit at our big in-service that we have for the diocese about curriculum? I said, I'll try it. So here we go. I have some handouts. I'm going to put them at your table first, but first I'm going to tell you what our learning goals are for this morning. Okay? The first one is I want you to just understand a little bit of what curriculum design and alignment means. Curriculum design and alignment. Okay? The next thing I want you to do is embrace the fact that God is in the details in your standards. We're just going to find him this morning. He is in the details in your standards. The last thing we're going to do is hopefully be inspired to keep our divine mission in mind while we are curriculum planning. Sound good? Questions, concerns? All right, here we go. Let me get these handouts out. Trying to save some trees, so the writing might be small. Forgive me about that. Thanks so much for the help.
bunch more that way.
Okay. No, this is not. This is general curriculum. It's going to be general curriculum. It's going to be general curriculum. Okay. So I told you that our first learning goal, as you're getting your handouts, that our first learning goal is to understand a little bit about curriculum design, what it is, and what is curriculum alignment. So we start with some key definitions, the boring stuff, but it's so very important. You need to know the difference between an educational standard and a curriculum, okay? Standards are the learning goals that you have for your kiddos. Curriculum is the how you're going to teach those goals. Okay, a lot of people get confused because we have this thing called a curriculum guide, and they say, oh my gosh, that is what we're supposed to teach. It is what we're supposed to teach. Those are the learning goals. But we go by in our diocese a standard-based curriculum. Okay? So the challenge when you have a standard-based curriculum like we follow, everybody knows that we follow, for the most part, the Diocese of San Antonio. Everybody familiar with that? Now, no pre-K, that's a different one. I know that some of you guys are still using Diocese of Dallas and things like that because San Antonio doesn't have that pre-K in place. But for the most part in our diocese, we use the Diocese of San Antonio. Just make sure I don't see you here in the headlights. Everybody knows that. You know, that was one of the things that happened when I started this curriculum journey in the diocese. As a different diocese, the different schools that I would go to had different ideas of what curriculum we were using. So I felt like that was a real important thing for us to understand that. I think you have to understand too that curriculum is you. You are the curriculum. So my challenge to everybody when you're lesson planning, when you're looking at those standards, is to work backwards a little bit, okay? Do something that I like to refer to as curriculum mapping. Instead of starting with looking at all of those standards to write your lesson plans, your daily plans, why not start thinking in broader terms? What units am I going to cover this year? Pre-K teachers, I know you guys are great at units. Right? Where's my pre-K teachers? Yes, great at units, right? Starting with the units and then filling in the standards that match that unit. Okay? Who starts with standards first? It's okay if you do. Nobody starts with standards first? Wow, that's great. You start with standards first. Math teacher, right? Yeah. Some people start with standards first, you know, and then they fill it in. They fill in how they're going to teach those standards next. You know, I would say to you that it is a challenge to try to start looking at the big picture. Think of your curriculum as a map. Think of all the different units you want to teach. Then go in and try to fill in where the standards fit. Okay? So that's the first idea of design. Curriculum design is how we design it around the standards. Curriculum being how you want to teach it. You know, one of the things that's the hardest for us as teachers is, part of us wants somebody to tell us what to do, how to do it. The other part says, no, this is my classroom. I want to do it my way. Well, sometimes when you do it your way, you're in a vacuum. I call it in a vacuum, meaning that you're not able to see the big picture about what everybody else is doing, because sometimes that's important. Remember, our church is universal, right? So our diocese needs to be universal in our plan of attack of those standards, okay? Know that when we're talking about curriculum design and how you teach, what you're going to use to teach with, what materials, what resources. When you're on a textbook committee, anybody been on a textbook committee? When you're on a textbook committee, that's so very, very important. Sometimes we take that for granted and we don't want to really look at that and take the time to do that. But that's huge because, right, a lot of us follow our textbooks. Who follows their textbook? Nobody follows their textbook? Some people follow their textbook? Okay. So if you're following your textbook and you're trying to get all the way through your textbook, do you ever get all the way through? No. You don't get through your textbook. Is that frustrating? Yes. Sometimes it's very frustrating because you worry, am I preparing my students for the next grade, right? So maybe when we're on a textbook committee and we're looking at textbooks, that we need to be looking at what textbooks cover the standards in our curriculum. Because then if they're covering the standards in our curriculum, maybe some of the things in our textbooks is not even things we need to be teaching. You know, if we first go ahead and map out our units, find out what we're going to teach, then go to the standards and see where they fit, it's a much easier way of lesson planning. Does it take time? Yes. Is it a marathon, not a sprint? Yes. Do you just have to decide you're going to start somewhere? Yes. Okay? Because does anybody enjoy lesson planning? No. And why do we not enjoy lesson planning? Who can help me? Takes too much time. What part takes too much time? Say it again. Deciding what you're going to do. Amen. So if you have this map, if you have this curriculum map, that in your mind you already have a plan for the year, what your units are going to be, that might be helpful because it's not fun to go on a trip and not know where you're navigating to, is it? And so that's what we do. Sometimes we just start and we look at the standards and we go, okay, standard number 1, when am I going to plug it in my lesson plans that I'm going to do it, right? I see some shaking heads, okay? So this is a little bit of a novel idea, but the people who have tried it have found it very rewarding. One of our mottos that we say at Hatch is that everyone we work with, whether you're a teacher, a parent, or a student, we want to teach you to learn, work, and live smarter, not harder. And I'm telling you, the smarter way to do lesson planning is to start with a curriculum map, with a plan in your head, kind of like your scope and sequence. Anybody do a scope and sequence? You do a scope and sequence. You know, that's kind of your guideline. It tells you where you're going this 9 weeks. So the goal would be, in this situation, is to start with where you're first on your scope and sequence in the first grading period, and then try to plug those standards into that. Instead of starting with the standards, try to plug that into your unit, into your scope and sequence, and then I think that is a smarter way to do your lesson plans. Because a lot of people, when I have these conversations about curriculum, they say the hardest part is going back and, oh my goodness, we have to document the standards. Right? And you do have to document the standards because we are accountable. We are accountable educators. So you need to make sure that your curriculum, how you're teaching, does match the standards in our curriculum. Does that make sense? Great. Okay, so that covers what's the difference between a standard and a curriculum. And the basic design of curriculum is really to be a unit-based system or a scope and sequence-based system. The research is pretty clear that that is the smarter, the easier way, the more effective way to get your lesson plans done. Because then that curriculum map will drive your day-to-day lesson planning. Okay? So what I need you to do now, class, if you understand the difference between a standard and curriculum, stand up. Are you standing? Okay. Hopefully everybody is standing. The difference between a standard and a curriculum. So when your principal starts talking to you about the standards or your curriculum, you understand what the difference is. All right, have a seat. Okay, that stand up, sit down, that's just a neat little teaching strategy that you might want to try in your classroom. It's a quick check for understanding. So I like to say, anytime you can get a quick check for understanding, you'll know if everything's going on like you had anticipated. All right, so the second thing we want to talk about is curriculum alignment. So now we know design, we know standards, we know curriculum, we know curriculum mapping, starting with the big picture. Starting with the big picture, okay? The next thing we need to talk about is alignment. There are 4 types of curriculum alignment: internal and external, vertical and horizontal. My favorite, and I think the one that you'll like the most, is internal alignment. And internal alignment is where we find God in the details. Internal alignment. We all know that we all interpret things we read differently, right? Okay? So internal alignment means we're going to look at our standard and we're going to say, you see the chart on your front page? We're going to start with our standard and we're going to say, to me, what does that mean the students need to know? What do they need to do? And for us in Catholic education, what do they need to be? I think we've left this out. I think because we're so busy lesson planning and plugging it into Renweb and trying to put the standards together that we don't even have our map to know where we're going anymore. We're trying to trudge through the textbooks, right? And so we forget one of the biggest blessings we have working in Catholic schools is God is with us. So why aren't we teaching our children to be Christ-like and responsible and respectful? We might do it when a teaching moment comes up. If we have children that are not cooperating with each other, we might do it. But I'm telling you, God is in the details of the standards. Let's look at the first one that I picked, just to show you. And I just picked a few to give you an idea what I mean by the being. So there's a social studies standard, a learning goal that says, identify some of the significant events that occurred during medieval times. So, in my mind, internally, I have to ask myself, what do they need to know? Well, they need to know some significant events of medieval times, right? What do they need to do? Well, I go back and I look at the verb in that standard. It says identify. I don't see that there's a lot of doing they need to have. Those are just some specific information they need to know. But how could I put God in those details? How could I teach children to be? Well, while I'm in there, how about me teaching them aware of how the medieval times affected us as Christians and as Catholics? You know, even if you're not the religion teacher, I know that Jesus is in every classroom. And I know that making connections, the research is clean. That's how children learn, when they can make connections across curriculum areas. So I told you that one of your learning goals was to embrace God in the details of your standards. That's what internal curriculum alignment is. Don't just write the standard down and write the number. I so appreciate your eyes. You're attentive. You know, I think that don't just write that standard down because you have to. Don't just write it down because you have to. Think about what it means. Internally align that standard in your heart, in your mind. What does that mean the kids need to know? What do they need to do? And what do they need to be as far as our mission as teaching them to be good Christian Catholics? Correct? Okay. So has anybody ever thought of it that way? You're so busy writing it down, you know, trying to, I often say, I can't even believe what a blessing the more I go into Catholic schools, and my husband and I were blessed enough to send our children through Catholic schools all the way, St. Rose, Sacred Heart, Hallettsville. So we were blessed to do that, and I saw such a difference in their lives. And even as grown men and husbands and fathers now, what you guys instilled in them was incredible. You know, they really do have those Christian principles, thanks to what you guys did and helped my husband and I do along the way. So I don't want, because we are so caught up all of a sudden in, oh, we have to do this, we have to do that. I think we're losing sight of God in the details of our standards. We are losing sight. And so that's what I call internal alignment. Make sure you figure out what they need to know, what they need to do, and what they need to be. In math, some of the ones in math, I'm the math teacher, you know, I thought about it when I was doing it. Well, one of the things in math that they need to be, when they're looking at tally charts and they're looking at graphs and things, they better learn to be objective. The kids of 2021 are not objective. Okay? So there's a standard right there in math. If you can just embrace that this year, that I'm going to help my students learn to be objective, not be judgmental. You know, to really be objective when they look at different issues. God is in the details, and we're missing it. You know, we're just writing down a standard. Internally align that in your heart and in your mind. The second one is from a language standard from 2nd grade. With guidance and support from adults, demonstrate understanding of word relationships. So I said when I'm doing my internal alignment, that means they've got to know word meanings and they have to understand what a relationship is. You know, you have to dissect, you've got to unpack the standard. So what does that mean they need to do? Well, see, I'm already lesson planning. Just by internally aligning. They need to analyze word meanings, so I need to do something with that. They need to demonstrate. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll do some sort of an art form where they're demonstrating relationship between words, right? And then if you go back to what the introductory phrase said, with guidance and support from adults. Here's what 2021 kiddos don't do either. What's the B? Accept, support, and guidance gracefully. God is there. We're just busy working on ring web. Instead of putting him back in the standards. Okay? Let's look at the last one that I have on the no do be chart. This is a grade 3 science. Conduct investigations of the outdoor environment in a responsible way with respect for the environment. So what do they have to know? They have to know investigation skills. Well, we teach that. That's part of our curriculum. It's probably in your textbook or whatever you're following. And they have to know, what do they have to do? They have to actually investigate. So in your plan, you have to decide, how am I going to create an activity or do something to make sure they are investigating? All right? And what does that mean when we're talking about the environment of things? One more time, we're going to cross-curricular connect. They need to be responsible and respect the environment. So put God back into the details when you're analyzing your standards. Okay? Questions or concerns about internal alignment? Does it sound doable? Little bit? You know, keep it in the back of your mind. I heard Ms. Combs, Teacher of the Year, talking about all the things we need to do. And one of the things that came clear to me was she said, let's relax. Let's remember why we're here. So I get it. There's lots of things you still need to do. I do get that. But let's start putting God back in the details, and maybe that other piece will be easier. Sound good? Amen? Amen. Okay. Let's go to the next kind of alignment. External alignment. That's one of the things your principals want you to do. Right? We're all taking these benchmark tests. Or the Iowa, or the ITBS, right? And your principals are looking at them, and they're coming back, in most cases, and saying, hey, this is where we're low in kindergarten. Hey, this is where we're low in 2nd grade. Okay? So what external alignment is taking the results of those tests and adjusting your curriculum. Not your standards, your curriculum. So when you're doing your internal alignment, your know, your do, your be, make sure some of those things that your principals talk about from the testing results also get put into your curriculum, what you're going to teach. Okay? And honestly, when you look at our curriculum, when you look at our standards, our curriculum guide, there's not that many standards. Do you agree? There's not too many standards. So when we go in and we do professional development activities, it blows my mind when I hear teachers say, I just can't get through the standards. Wowza. Are you looking at them? There's 8 or 9. Wowza. You got them all year, girls and boys. You got them all year. I mean, I don't get it. And this is the whole dynamic that I think I'm trying to do when we go into our schools and work with curriculum. What is making this so difficult? What is making this so difficult? And I do think the process of writing the lesson plans, I think the process of coming up with what are you going to do, I think we have to have some answers to that. I think we have to start with the big picture and fill in the details. Right? And I think you got to put God back in those details and start realizing sometimes you don't have to get through that whole textbook. If you got 9 or 10 standards, I think a 400-page math book is going to cover more than that. Then get back on your horses in your textbook committees. Do a better job. Do a better job of making sure a textbook, because it is a lot easier to go through the textbook and cruise through it. It's a lot easier. And if you find one that's aligned, meaning it covers the standards, that's even easier. But we can't be so caught up in, no, I don't like this, I don't like the way they teach this. We have to go back to this universal situation. We have to go back to, just because I don't like it doesn't mean the second grade teacher doesn't like it. Doesn't mean the third grade teacher doesn't like it. And I'm going to give you Curriculum 101 right here. Even if the curriculum is poopy, terrible curriculum, poopy curriculum, even if it's poopy, if everybody does it, it works. Okay? Now I'm going to say another bad word. Common Core. Everybody said Common Core got such a bad idea because we're all supposed to be doing the same thing. Well, help me understand why the learning goals in second grade in Texas should be different from the learning goals in Oklahoma for a second grader. Common Core is not about telling you how to teach. That was that animal that we killed called C-scope. That was the animal we killed called C-scope. That was telling you how. Common Core is just telling you what to cover. It's up to you to figure out how you're going to cover it. And it just makes more sense. The brain likes patterns. I like to tell people, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about strategies in our next session. You are not in the education business. You're in the brain business. You are in the brain business. And the brain likes patterns. So if they hear it said one way by the first grade teacher, they need to hear that same concept said in a certain particular same way, at least some common academic language in the second grade. But sometimes we have taken God out of our details and our own selves. We're so busy saying, I don't care that first grade likes Saxon. I'm going to not teach phonics because I don't like phonics. Even though, by the way, phonics is in the standards through 5th grade. 5th grade. Okay? So we can't be doing that because all we're doing is being self-centered, I'll call it. You know, we have to be able to understand that we're here for the good of the order, for the good of our school, for the good of our students, for the good of our diocese. Okay? So, internal alignment, know do be. External alignment, make sure that how you're teaching, the materials you're using, covers what your principals are saying are some of the deficits that we're seeing, some of the skill gaps that we're seeing in the testing. The next big animal is called vertical alignment. Turn to this page. You see this page? I've vertically aligned a strand for you. Okay? So, vertical alignment just means we're going to take the same area, the same domain. Okay? So let's talk about this. Where it says at the top, reading standards, foundational skills. So the subject area is reading, correct? The domain is foundational skills, K through 5. This is how you read it. The specific area under foundation skills that we're going to talk about in this strand is fluency. So what we did, go back all the way to kindergarten. And I'm sorry, pre-K. I need to align it. I just am not sure. It's so nice the way the Diocese of San Antonio has it, because it's all grouped into these different domains, and the domains are not there in pre-K. The domains are not there. So I know they're working on it, pre-K. I know they're working hard on it. Dr. Corey, that's his mission. Curriculum is his mission. So here we go. So under fluency in kindergarten, look what they're supposed to be doing. Read emergent reader text with purpose and understanding. Okay? Where does that go in first grade? Now they have to read that text with sufficient accuracy and fluency. Then there's some sub things under there. Go to 2, read with sufficient accuracy and fluency to score comprehension. Look at that. Those are the same. So you keep on saying, oh, I just can't cover the standards. If we were vertically aligned, you could see that some standards are introduced in your grade level, some standards are practiced because they're going to be continued in the next grade level, and some standards have to be mastered. So when you vertically align your curriculum like this, all we did was look under fluency and say, under fluency, what do we have to do, grades K through 5? Anybody looked at a curriculum in this fashion before? Yeah, just a couple of people. Okay, raise your hand if this would make it easier on you to decide what you have to cover. Yay, yay. Okay, so this is kind of demystifying curriculum alignment. Okay, so this would be so much nicer where you could see exactly where fluency starts and where it stops. Now, if you had your curriculum map and you were doing a novel study, fluency standards could be all through that with each novel that you read or each storybook you read in kindergarten. Those standards could be right through there, all the way up through 5th grade that says, guess what? The same thing. Look at the verbs. It's all the same. You know, the difference is by 3rd grade, we start adding prose and poetry. Okay? If we analyze this on a know, do, and be chart internally, if we analyze some of these standards, we'd have to say, what do they need to know to be able to do this? Well, to be fluent, you better know how to decode words. That's a prerequisite, right? So you teachers that are frustrated because children aren't fluent and they can't read, it's because somehow in the mix of trying to cover all the standards, we miss the phonics. Who teaches phonics? I know math people don't. Okay. But math people, you have word problems, don't you?
We do, and they do have to know how to read.
They do have to know how to read them, and again, cross-curriculum connections. Sometimes it would be helpful if you knew the phonics language that you're using in your schools. Because then, when a child is having trouble reading a word, you can go back and you say, okay, I'm teaching 4th grade, but I know in 1st grade, they say ER says herb like in butter because they use Saxon phonics. So instead of just going to the child and saying, I hear this all the time, I'll walk up into a fourth grade math classroom. And the kiddo is struggling trying to read the word problem. I can't read it, Miss Lulu. Okay. The teacher says, well, sound it out. The kid says, I can't read it. Well, sound it out. Break it down. Well, those are common terms that nobody is carrying vertically. So I'm telling you, if the boy could sound it out, he would. 85% of the time. 85% of the time. I work with behavior disorders, so I know there's that 15% that just don't want to do. But really and truly, I just think I'm trying to hammer home the fact that we need to align the curriculum vertically. We need to know what is introduced when, and when you don't get to see it again, and when you're responsible at that grade level for having that skill mastered, okay? The last type of alignment is horizontal alignment. Horizontal alignment is, to me, the cream of the crop. That's where if you've already internally aligned, you've externally aligned, you're vertically aligned. Horizontal alignment is when you take a concept like research, and you say, oh my gosh, research comes up in third grade history, social studies. It also comes up in third grade English language arts. So horizontally across the curriculum, math, reading, science, social studies, it's research. Well, if we were getting together and we were having conversations as a faculty, and you knew that research was one of the areas that we could align horizontally, then the social studies teacher is not assigning a research paper due the same week as the English teacher. And you're going to avoid parents saying, oh my gosh, why are y'all putting so much on? So again, the issue is the standard has to be covered. But I challenge you that if you're looking at the standards, some of the standards are the same as far as some concepts across science, social studies, math, language arts. And if they're the same, that means everybody doesn't have to do it. Somebody can cover it. If we make a plan on who's going to cover it, it's making a plan. So now you say, all right, lady, but when are we going to have time to do this? I have a few principals here. You know, and I said this to those two back there. Ellen, I said it to Mr. O'Leary's group yesterday. Sister Ellen. She was my principal, my first year teaching. Professional development is great when you go out and about and you go and you see all these other neat techniques and things. But it's poopy if you don't come back and have somebody help you implement it. So really, when I was teaching, I'm just saying it, principals, that was a social affair. It was fun. It was a social affair. It was fun. And sometimes, I'm not going to say, there was some really dynamic presenters, some information that I really needed at the moment, and it helped. But once I got back into daily lesson planning, it went out. You know how it goes. Y'all know how it goes. So I challenged the principals to say, hey, why not when there's a professional development day? Why can't you guys sit planning? Why can't you do vertical curriculum alignment? Why can't you talk to each other horizontally about what concepts? Now, you're not going to know your concepts if you're not starting with the big idea. Start with your units. Start with your scope and sequence. Some people write scope and sequences. We talked about that, right? Okay? So, again, I challenge you to think of it that way. To have time to talk to one another to get this in place. So you are working smarter and not harder. Okay. So, to wrap us all up here, I hope you do. I hope you do now understand that the standard is not your curriculum. And that curriculum guide is not telling you how to teach it or what materials. I caution you that if your school has adopted a textbook and the principal expects you to use that textbook, please don't be defiant. Please don't be defiant, because the principal's job is to make sure it is more fluid across the grade levels. And when we stop and do our own thing, that's great, and I think you need to add your personal spin. But please don't forget the good of the order when you're talking about curriculum. And please, please, please take this with you. If you're on a textbook committee, take it seriously. Try to be Christ-like. Try to be cooperative. Try to be friendly with one another. It's not about you. It's about the kids. And it's about our Lord and our diocese. Okay? Standards and curriculum. Second thing, I would love for you to embrace the fact that God can be in the details of those standards. Be thinking about that. How can you interpret that standard of how you can teach children to be something that we're trying to be in our mission at our schools? Okay? And finally, I hope that you might be inspired by God. I prayed hard before I started this that He might be inspiring you while we were talking. Inspire you to at least change one thing about your curriculum planning this year. One thing. And hopefully it will be something to do with God being back in the details. Okay? I also challenge you to try to talk to each other. Let me give you that chance right now. Turn to your neighbor. And I'd like for you to discuss with your neighbor one thing you might do differently next year. One thing in your plan. Okay, yeah, inspiration. One thing you might do differently. Okay. I hope you have more time at school, but I want to get us out of here on time so you can have a little break before your next session. You'll have one volunteer that can tell me one thing that you're going to try differently, that you've been inspired. Anybody volunteer? Yes, ma'am. Scope and sequence. This young lady says she is going to work on scope and sequence. Good job. Anybody else have anything different? Yes, ma'am. Go, girl. I'm telling you, you'll be a happy girl. Where do you teach? In El Campo? I have to come. I got you there. Okay. Okay.